right. Hello, everyone, for another edition of Dissolving the Divide. I'm Leslie Powers here with Derek Bartolicelli, and we're really excited to introduce our guest for today, Kris Nelson. Derek, go right ahead and introduce our guest.
Yeah, sure. Really excited to speak with you in person for the first time, Kris. I've known your work for years. Phenomenal infographics and presentations that you've backed up, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, you're one of the original members of the One Great Work Network, and you've been quite an influence on a lot of people, true speakers. My friend Brandon Spencer speaks really highly of you, and checks out all your work, and I've seen other presenters use your infographics and that kind of thing, and so yeah, pleasure and such an honor to have you on. We're going to be discussing some interesting things and getting into some causal factors that create a lot of divide in and of itself, just based off of reality perception, how the truth is twisted, or there's different sides of it, or just not getting the whole thing. We got the misinformation, disinformation, as opposed to just raw pure info. So, and that's like kind of that dark trivium that you've mentioned. And speaking of which, we got a conference that we are really gonna set a very high standard as far as what's going on, and I'm gonna honor some of your works, and I appreciate you allowing me to showcase some of that in my little presentation I'm gonna flip through during the conference. But yeah, not to ramble on anymore. Kris Nelson, what is good, brother man? Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Yeah, thanks for the intro, and sure, feel free to use any of my infographics and anything you want to talk about to anybody. Anybody can just use them, and as long as you don't like put a logo for your site and say pretend that you created it, then that's another issue. But I've had that happen to me. But yeah, should be a good conversation, and I don't know where you guys want to start off from there, or if you want to ask a question or talk about a subject, and see if I can respond.
Before we started, you talked about truth as being divisive, and let's just start there with how is that so? How do you see truth as divisive?
Well, the main part, I guess, would be when someone is attached to a falsity. Either they believe something that is false as true, so rather than actually knowing if it's true, which is unfortunately the case for like most people, even many people in the truther movement, there's to really understand the difference between when you can call something true and when it's actually a belief of something that's probable or possible. That's one thing, but the biggest issue, I would say, is the biggest divide is when someone's attached to falsity, and you can explain to them what they're attached to, but you just say, like, you could say like X is wrong or X is false, or what you're doing is wrong, or just anything about their self-view or about their worldview. So the things they become attached to and they use as a foundation for how they view themselves or the whole world itself, that is very, very hard to let go of. And whenever you present information that goes against something that someone identifies with as part of their self-view, or the various aspects of our worldview that is directly associated with our self-view, whenever something confronts and contradicts that, it's viewed as an attack to our ego, what I've termed in my work, the ego personality identity construct. Mm-hmm. And so it's viewed as an attack against us, ourselves, because our ego identity personality construct is built around the information we've received and been conditioned with our whole lives from the day we're born, even in the womb. All the experiences we have up until the day we die will work to shape us, to form us, to alter us, to change us, to modify us as we go forward. Some things from our subconscious that will influence us without us knowing the direct causal association of how we got this thought or this modality of behavior, or this programmed habit and conditioning of how we live our lives. So a lot of that is conditioned into us, and we associate it directly with our identity, and it becomes part of how we view ourselves and how we view the world and what makes sense in the world and how we make sense of ourselves in relation to the world. And whenever there's information that goes up against that and contradicts it, there's an automatic emotional defense mechanism that takes place that can be perceived through your emotions. You can reflect upon what's happening internally inside of you when someone tells you something that's false, or that, well, for them, they're going to say that it's false, and what you're going to hear from them, you're going to think that what they say is false. But that's the important part is, well, that's, I guess, in that first flowchart that I made in 2014 that Derek has, the reality versus perception chart, is when you have that
out
conflict.
later, because I think the free flow of that is going to be something else. But you bring up some good points real quick. I'm sorry to cut you off, but yeah, you're talking about the knee-jerk reactions, the emotional, just it's reacting instead of responding properly. And
yeah, instead of reevaluating to know, well, is what they're saying true, and is what I have false, or are they telling me something that they think is true and is actually false? And in such case, then your reaction, which can be emotional and negative, well, then you need to take the time to evaluate. And then if they're wrong, well, then there's no reason for you to get that upset anyways. It's not like something you had was false. So there's always this need to, like, instead of, okay, internally you're going to react negatively, but don't let it show too much, I guess, on the external through your physiology and your behavior, because you can take the time to reflect and recognize that's going on inside of you, and then do the evaluation of, okay, is what I have currently now the accurate thing? Is this new piece of information more accurate? And then you need to suss that out before immediately dismissing it, because then that you get into that, not really solipsism, but just the immediate dismissal, rejection, and ignorance, willful ignorance. Yeah,
that's the thing, and like,
which is the emotional mind control
right there,
controlling you. Yeah, boom. And then you just reject it.
Yeah, it's like people have such strong emotional investment and attachment. I like that word that you used, to a topic. And, often it's a topic that they relate to somehow. And sometimes that the emotions are actually being manipulated, through media and things like that. But people are coming from a sense of like care from their perspective, that they really feel strongly about something that's important that they need to get across to others. But like you're saying, they often have worldviews and self-identity that's based on a fallacy, right? So even though they care, coming forward with the fallacy is creating division. And you're talking about the importance of slowing down, of pausing, right? For people to like back up and manage their emotions, really. And
maybe even like look into the other opposite side of the polarization of why they're getting triggered of whatever, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider that a lot of people just don't consider, because it's like the reaction, the R complex of the brain is tugging from, imbalanced emotions, because heartstrings are being pulled. We've mentioned this, over and over again in our series already, of how there's that emotional mind control tactics of the media that you mentioned, Leslie, and so many factors, including what you previously mentioned as well, Kris. So yeah, any insights about that, man? And how solutions for people to like breathe, like some people you see them in like a real face-to-face argument, and they're getting flustered. Like, hey, it's okay if you don't know all the answers, or you don't know the information that I'm talking about. Take your time to look into it. If you want a reference, I'll hook you up, or any advice like that, or
yeah, exactly. It's what you both said. First is take a step back and don't immediately respond in like with rage or whatever, and then like you just said, you got to take the time to look into it, because we could be wrong about whatever we think we know is the truth, because again, that's part of some of the stuff that I've talked in previous presentations about what's the difference between truth and belief, and that's another thing. But it's all tied together into how to be better thinkers. That's associated with the trivium method of how to learn and how to think better. So That's all a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the goal here is unity, right? The goal here is to unite around truth. What do you see as the biggest barriers here for people, for us as humans to do this?
Well, first of all, you have to care for truth. So in like the alchemical distillation infographic, well, that's the one I have, or the elemental quaternity infographic, that's where you have it starts with that flame, and that's that's the philosopher's stone, but that one doesn't have
Hey,
the
it's my
imagery
favorite.
that I'm
I just
getting at.
that's
Yeah, it's
number
okay.
one in my books from you. But let's go to the distillation process because that is
There we
off
go.
the
Yeah.
hook.
So that one has the flame. So that's where it starts. It's I'm gonna go to my browser because that image is a bit too small for me.
That's a beautiful image. Just want to say it's really well done.
Yeah.
I
So
love
I've
it.
made
One of my
a
favorites.
few models. Like the tarot or the Kabbalistic tree of life. Those are models that try to take certain knowledge and put it into like a model of a way of understanding the flow of ideas and how they progress. Well, this is what I did here with the natural law and trivium, which has been a big focus of my earlier work. And so that flame is either you care for truth or you have like started going off of Passio's, the fear and the love, internal expressions of consciousness. Well, it starts
That
with
lost
the fear.
principle.
Yeah, and then the care, and that's where you got to care. So you got to care for truth, and that brings you to the expansion of consciousness and love and agape and caring for others and caring for the freedom of all. And that's where it starts. Is you got to have that initial care and desire to learn. And so that's the biggest barrier of why, I guess globally we're not advancing, is that most people don't care really for truth. They might say they do, but they don't have more of a deeper yearning for truth that drives them and propels them to motivate their behaviors in order to go out and seek information that is negative. And that would be the most important part, I find, is first you have to know the problem before you can know that there is even a need for a solution. So you have to, that's the importance of facing the negative and all the falsity in the world and being willing to face it in yourself, and when other people speak it to you, to hear it so that you can know if what you currently have is right or wrong. And it's important to want to be right, not just to be right, just to say that you're right, but so that you're not wrong, so that you're not on the false path, the wrong path. You need to be on the way and path of what is true, right, good, love, etc., and not
that's
be on the wrong
empowering
way.
as well.
Yes, it is
All these
empowering.
things, that we learn, and I don't know about your observations, but this whole time, during my truth-seeking thing, I've noticed like, well, other people are claiming this type of truth and that kind of stuff. Things are so compartmentalized and fragmented to the umpteenth degree, whether it be in like the esoteric realm or the exoteric realm or mainstream media, geopolitical level of awareness, or someone who's pierced the ninth fucking veil. It doesn't matter. Like, people are all over the map on where they feel like they actually are, as far as like embodying whatever sense of truth they have about reality. But a lot of things seem to be bypassed within the internal alchemical process of that inner gnosis, which is kind of what we laid down the foundation of one of our initial 4 or 5 episodes of this. And like, for other people to be programmed into the idea that they have the sense of care, and there's the virtue signaling going on now, and the wokenism, whatever the hell, schism that's got folks up in a head cage prison. That's for damn sure, unfortunately. But you see how people are operating off of this negative knowledge, and they feel like they feel like they truly care about certain things, but just the reality has been so twisted that like, we're at odds, polarized, where 2 + 2 = 5 to them, when it's really 4 and forevermore, kind of. But yeah,
It's like there's a difference between caring for a cause and like being the Karen, right, versus that what you're saying, Kris, is you have to love the truth. Caring for the truth is the real place of unity. And if we can all unite around truth seeking, then the outcome's going to be different than if we're distracted and picking random causes and going off in scattered directions. Do you want to?
Yeah, that like the first part would be caring for truth, and you also, so with the implications of caring for truth is to care about what's right over what's wrong in terms of just truth itself, what's correct and what's incorrect, but also, more importantly, the most important one is what's morally right or wrong and morally correct and incorrect. And that's where you have to eventually get to. And that's the real unity where you can create with other people. We can co-create together when we're walking on the same moral path and way. That's when we can be united together in morality to actually co-create together. Because if you're not on the same path, then you're likely going to have moral conflicts with other people because they're not walking the same level of morality as you are. And I've experienced that in my life. And so that's why, you gotta focus on, if you're gonna be living with someone like daily and weekly, then you gotta really be on the same moral path. But overall for humanity, we just have to be on the same understanding of not accepting the legitimacy of the belief of authority to control or rule others. That's just the main one. And then whatever other issues that we have, those can come afterwards there, but the main one would be that one. But so you got to care for truth. You got to be willing to admit you're wrong so that you can let go of what's wrong and align more with everyone towards that goal of getting a better, accurate perspective and perception of what is true. And I forget what you said, Derek, but I was going to say, yeah, you're right on with that. And I was going to snowball onto you got to keep going from there. I totally forgot after what Leslie said. I forgot.
Oh, sorry.
Was it as far as, people reassessing what they think they know and doing that proper inner work more?
Yeah, I think I think that's what you were saying, and that's what comes after, right? You gotta care for truth, and you gotta be willing to admit you're wrong. Because if you care for truth, but you're not willing to admit you're wrong, then you don't actually care for truth, because you're just gonna hold on to what is false, even if you come across it, because you're not actually reevaluating it. And then you gotta learn how to think, and that's part of the other part of the work I did was on reality processing and the trivium and thinking and how we input information and verification of information. Otherwise, what you have is a belief of something maybe being probable or possible, or just completely made up, but it makes you feel good. It gives you an answer, so it fills that hole and that gap, comprehension and void and darkness, abyss, in what you. Whenever you don't have an answer to a question, it creates that in your worldview. So the ground you're walking on has holes, and that doesn't make for a stable, secure footing for you to navigate and build your life in. So there's a lot of apprehension. Well, it's fear that leads to anxiety, insecurity, discomfort from having questions. And the deeper they are and the more poignant they are, and you don't have an answer, then the more you're going to have that anxiety and doubt and insecurity and discomfort. And you're going to want to fill in that hole with just something that makes you feel like it makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense. But it's like putting a patch in that hole say there's a pothole in the road, and you just you pour in a bunch of glue, or you pour in a bunch of water. Well, it's going to fill it over, but it's water. Your car is just going to still go in, and the water's going to come splashing out. So what you're putting into...
think of it as like putting a Band-Aid over a tumor.
Yeah,
the causal factors of all this stuff, and what's driving people to live in this fear-based daily operation type of thing. Of course, some of the media that they're consuming, some of the food that they're consuming, and all these things. So yeah, it's just really interesting to break all these things down, and so we can build it back up again properly on that, solid, foundation that you were talking about. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
All good. And just to mention that the graphic there, that's another model that I made, like the alchemical distillation. It's just another way of looking at all these concepts that I probably mostly got from Mark Passio's work, and just coalescing them and aggregating them into a visual way to present the information in a way that can be more understood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you want, we can just flip through. I got 7 more slides, including this one. So yeah, if you just want to run through each one for, a couple minutes, and then,
Sure.
if Leslie,
Yeah.
if you have any questions, or I kind of, yeah.
Yeah, whatever logic, works. What's logical for you, Kris?
Well, we can go through the slides. That's all good. And if you had specific questions like you have now, just interrupt any time and ask me.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you right now. No, just kidding.
You bastard.
Yeah, just yeah. Obviously, just keep it in mind, where we're getting at as far as like identifying, these divisive things and how we can, flip the script and, unify and all that good stuff. But yeah, I'll let you have it, boss.
Sure. So, in alignment with that whole part of caring for what is true, and then you have to go out and find it, is I got this term from, I think, Sarion, alchemical divorce. And so there's 2 parts where I've named it. Part 2, I guess, will be after, and this is part 1, where you have a divorce, apophysis, a negation, a deconstruction of your false perception of reality. So this would be that has like a nice picture with some grass and an angel and everything's nice, and this would be the equivalent of rose-colored glasses, of how most people view. They have a false perception. So the rose-colored glasses can be some other thing where you view as everything is good even when bad things happen. And some people aren't even rose-colored glasses, but they have a false perception of reality. So the way they see reality isn't the way that reality actually is. So that's this first part. This representation is where this false reality. First, you have to be willing to destroy those false perceptions that, oh, well, things aren't this nice, and then you poke through the holes in the puzzle, and you're seeing behind. So right there behind the angel, well, there's the demon. So you start to see the demon, and the tree, well, it has no leaves and it's dying, and well, you get to see more with the negative and the chaos and the immorality and the evil in the world. That it's not all good like the first image was with the angel and everything, and it's spring and everything's growing, or the fall, or whatever it is with the leaves falling down. But it's a nice picture, and it's not all good. You got to look and see the demonic world that we're actually in. And that's what this part represents. So you have yourself, your worldview, your self-concept, your self-view, your self-image, what's essentially a delusion from false percepts. You have to remove that falsity and pierce into aspects of the veiled reality behind your misperception. And that's what's behind, is the hidden, what is denied, what is veiled, obfuscated reality, the hell that we have to face. So an information catalyst can provoke a disturbance and put pressure on your false conceptions and bring us to shatter our lies and to shake these false perceptions of reality and to poke holes through the veil. So a lot of the times, like for me, my catalyst was a Terror Storm from Alex Jones in 2006. That was my catalyst that shook me and showed me that the world isn't as it seems. And that's what made me care to go on what I termed a knowledge quest at the time. And later what I realized is, I actually started to care for truth more at a deep core level, where the flame was becoming ignited and propelling me on that journey, on that spiritual quest, that truth quest, the spiritual path, truth path, however you want to term it. And so what I view is some people, I don't know why, but they don't have the catalyst, that they don't suffer enough. That's why we need more chaos, we need more suffering to come into our lives, because for some people, apparently, it's not bad enough for them to care that they have their perception or their expectation of reality, and then reality smacks and puts holes in that false perception, but they still don't care enough to be like, oh, I'm living in a delusion, I'm living in a false world, or what is real, what is false, let me see if I can figure that out. People just get smacked down with reality, smacking them down from their living in the clouds in fantasy land, and they get
Marty
smacked down
West
to
likes
the
to
ground.
call it, when the universe gives you a bitch slap, kind of.
Yeah,
Because
there you
you're just
go.
like living unaligned, and you bring up some great points with that. And when I first was compiling this little slideshow and going over the alchemical divorce, the whole time in my mind I'm like, it's really cool, and it's interesting, just like considering the alchemical wedding of like being in alignment, being at that center point between the two pillars of enlightenment, and operating fully functional with the proper feminine masculine balance. So yeah, and
I
how
love the
so
imagery. I
manipulated.
really love that puzzle image. It brings that home really well for me visually.
Yeah, that's why I made it as like, because that's your worldview, so it's a window, so
Mhm.
you're looking into it and you see outside of it. Well, the previous one was all nice, and then you got to destroy it to see the world as it really is.
Mhm.
And then in this one is where you're deconstructing and putting to death and divorcing in the apophysis of your false self, the shadow, the darkness, the demon negative in yourself and in the reality. And by facing the darkness of reality and in yourself, well, that's when we can remake the hell into an actual heaven on earth. We could actually live in something that's
Mhm.
very beneficial and peaceful and harmonious for everyone.
Mhm.
But everyone has to go through this alchemical process. That's the first part of the great work, right? It's to do the alchemical self-renewal, continual self-renewal, the phoenix being reborn from its ashes, putting to death the false and the negative and being reborn. And
How do you make this known? How important it is to people. Because I think a lot of people just they say, it's the past. We don't want to look at that. Don't look at the negative. I'm just going to focus on this, what's right in front of me, right? And put blinders on. And why, we all know that this is dangerous to do that, and that it's really important. But how do you tell people that?
what can you give an example? So you're
You
saying
know,
that they're
like we're saying that there's a need to go in and look at this, the falsity, the uncomfortable, to look at the world as it, with its negative aspects, right? And that there's a need to look at your own shadow, your own darkness. And a lot of people have been conditioned to not look at the painful and uncomfortable. And why do when if you're talking to somebody and you're wanting them to know why it's so important to do so, what would you say to them?
well, on an individual basis, that there could be multiple avenues for them as an individual of what their issue is. Maybe they don't care about truth. Maybe they don't understand the importance of the negative in order to actually create what's positive. You have to get rid of the negative, or else what you have isn't what's positive. You just have the negative in what you're doing, and ignoring it isn't going to make it go away. So I guess that would be just a basic understanding of, well, you have two drops of positive and you have this one negative here, and you just want to focus on the positive. Okay, well, what's happening to this negative over here? People are still in their actions, they're still creating that into the world, and you ignoring it isn't going to make it go away. Like if I come at you with a knife, you closing your eyes isn't going to make me charging at you with a knife go away. So
Right.
you gotta face the negative, and until someone, there's multiple ways to, I guess, dissect their psychological framework to try to go in and see, well, where is the blockage of why you don't understand this? And maybe in the end, it comes down to, well, they just don't care for truth, that they're apathetic. So that's why they don't even care about the negative. So then you have to get them to care about truth. And unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen to a lot of people, where it's that flame ignited in them, and it's in the core of your being that's driving you forward to want to know more, to try to figure out, well, how does the world actually work? What are the bad things happening, so that we can get rid of those bad things? It's going to take more suffering. That's unfortunately what it is. It's the chaos and the suffering that's going to be needed to
Yeah.
actually, potentially, maybe not. In a lot of people's cases, they'll just go to the grave and never have that flame awakened for whatever issues they have in their life, but learned helplessness or traumas in their past or whatever it is. They don't value themselves enough. But
right, lots of reasons, and
yeah.
it involves the individual really looking at themselves and going within and being willing, to open their eyes to themselves. And I think, like you said, finding that catalyst, which is this like an awakening or a motivating moment where you start to have emotion.
But here's the thing, like some of this great work that we're doing, sorry to cut you off, but it's to have people avoid such a, physically or emotionally or, any kind of spiritually traumatic experience be that catalyst. Like, we don't have to take it that far. Like, we can align the natural law and, like, have a more of an activated, sense of self and, alignment to truth without such a,
catastrophic, right, situation.
Catalyst.
That's there in counseling. We there's a type of counseling called motivational interviewing, and where it's really working with people who are stuck, say, in addiction. That's where this model is created. People who are very stuck in repeating negative patterns over and over again, and so as counselors, we want to try to help people to see the problems earlier, right? So it doesn't lead to that huge hitting bottom experience where there's a lot of damage done and a lot to repair. So obviously the goal is to help wake people up sooner, people break out of their addictions before their life is total hell. And, it's like seeing what's really important in this. There's this wheel of change is something called pre-contemplation. And that's before people have even recognized there's a problem at all. They're just going on like normal. They don't even know there's a problem. They don't see the consequences. They have their magic world, like with the angel and the sunshine and everything's pretty. And then in reality, though, things start to happen in life, whether it happens to your neighbor, or your friend, or yourself. There's usually signs along the way. And so we want to help people to see those things and to be able to connect those things to what they're avoiding, and to start to admit and see that maybe there is a problem, and let's really contemplate this problem and bring out, the facts and all the truth, seeking methods along the way. And I think that's where we come in, is really helping people hopefully to look at and see the problems related to their illusions as we go.
Yeah, I agree. It's Darren, when just before you started talking, I remembered something you said from the previous time you spoke, and then I was like, oh yeah, there was that point I wanted to make, and now I forgot it again.
That's why I got pen and paper. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm not used to
around a lot sometimes.
Interviews. Yeah, that's a good tactic. I'll get a piece of paper here next time. I'll employ that method and not forget my things.
Yeah.
It was the part of the negative where a large part of this is the psychological aspect of pleasure seeking and pain avoidance. That's why there's some of the work I've done is the focus on the pleasure trap, and this also ties into what Derek was speaking about. I don't know, I just had another flash of what he said, and then when I was talking about that, I forgot it again, but it was related to the pleasure and pain, something to do with that. But yeah, sorry, I forget.
It seems like in the pursuit of truth that people go out, get digression by going off on these, like Mark calls them cul-de-sacs, but addictions and pleasure seeking often are those distractions, right?
Yeah, that's one of the big problems is the because we're psychologically geared towards pleasure and avoidance of pain. Oh yeah, I think, Derek, you were mentioning something about, or maybe it was Leslie, but the suffering and the pain we have to go through. And yeah, it was Derek. And that's the point I wanted to mention was the people are avoiding the pain and whatever. I forget exactly what you mentioned, but it relates to ignorance is bliss, that saying, because staying in ignorance is bliss in a sense, because then you don't have the burden of the knowledge weighing upon you and the personal responsibility of having to act and do something with that knowledge to change the world, because that's a heavy responsibility and a heavy burden. So once you have knowledge, it comes with a burden, and that takes you out of that feel-good ignorance is bliss. So of course, in that state, you know, like the ancient Egyptian proverb of ignorance is evil, that has to do with the ignorance of moral knowledge will make you evil in a sense, because you'll be walking on the checkerboard floor, like the first degree tracing board and the Masonic checkerboard floor. You'll be walking on a board, you'll be walking in reality, but you won't know if the path you've chosen is actually a dark square, representative of immorality and falsity, or a light square representative of good and truth. So when you're ignorant of good and evil, well, you could be doing things that are wrong, that are immoral, and not know it. And so that's why, yes, ignorance is bliss in a sense, because you don't have that psychological burden and the urgency and the determination and the dedication and the persistence to try to change the world and make it better, because it's quite a responsibility, and you can't do it by yourself. So it's an ongoing thing, the great work to do moral education. Yeah,
And
sorry, I forgot where I was going with that again. Sorry about that.
But this moral education,
Wait, it's about avoiding all this unnecessary self-inflicted suffering?
Yeah, well, that's part of the ignorance is bliss and knowledge is suffering, but it's the opposite, because when you get knowledge, the end goal is you're going to be removing the suffering, and the people in ignorance are not going to be happy, because they're just digging themselves into greater and greater enslavement. That's why I was tying in with the Egyptian ignorance is evil and ignorance is bliss, is that it's not actually bliss, it's what brings you towards greater evil. And the knowledge, although it might be suffering, and the burden of it, because that's in one of my texts I did, was on compassion, bearing the weight. I forget what I called it, but it had to do with like the etymology of compassion is interesting, because it has to do with suffering, and you're bearing that weight of suffering. So this ties into that when you gain knowledge, you're ultimately the knowledge that you're going to be striving for, and your path of truth is the ultimate goal is moral truth, and that will bring you towards that capability of you're going to be more compassionate about the all, as in the sense of the higher love, the truer love of agape, of caring for all, and instead of just your personal life. So you're going to try to apply freedom for all. And I'll just leave that there, because I'll just yeah.
So the end goal is the removal of suffering, but one bears the weight of the suffering of the world on the way to that goal, right? And that's where people have a hard time sometimes and turn away, because they don't like the discomfort of seeing, the painful reality and having to bear that burden.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then sometimes people choose to put the blinders on or turn the other way again, and maybe pursue the pleasure, with the feeling good, instead of really pursuing truth.
Yeah. That was a large part of my earlier work too, which is why I have the one article, Truth is Love, Love is Truth, goes into that. So that's the whole part of the getting back to the original topic of this division of truth. Well, people, they get into like, oh, well, don't rock the boat. That's the whole false unity thing. It's better. Oh, don't be so divisive. We need to unite. Well,
and that disagree, agree to disagree kind of thing sometimes.
Well, you can agree to disagree.
No, you can pull that card when it's necessary, but
on truths in general, agree to disagree. There's like whatever. You have to get your priorities. So right now, pick anything that people have contention over, and any of the Hegelian dialectics of like one side being true and all you need is the other side to buy into the falsity, to create a conflict that then the other side is automatically going to be against, because they're on the side of truth, so they're going to be automatically against the bullshit of the other side. All of those topics. Passio's done in one of the 200 episodes, I think he did a recap on like divide and conquer and listed a bunch of the things, the false Hegelian dialectics where
Yeah, that was a great
one side can be true and the other side can be false, but all it takes is the one side buying into it, and they're going to attack the other side, and the other side defends themselves, even though it only takes one side of the dialectic to buy into it for the other side to, well, they're going to defend themselves and they're going to stand in what they stand for.
Yeah, totally. And they're programmed to like have this, go into the slide. And I'd love for you to like break it down real quick, because there's a follow-up to this one. But people are programmed to have like an apathy for like the opposing side, which could be true or whatever. And there's so many, things thrown into the mix of, especially today, social media, fucking controlled opposition, fucking COINTELPRO, bro, on the down low, how that go? But yo, check it. Just like there's all these things, and people think they got it figured out, this kind of truth, and it's like this drama fed type of frenzy going on with these polarized positions of people just spitting at the top of the mouth on the internet or in real life. It's really sad. And so like I see a lot of apathy from that, and just like that lack of like true care and compassion for themselves and just for other people as well, and having a proper respect for your fellow brother man, sister man, and woman, sorry, and with that agape, right? So yeah, what's up with that, Kris?
Well, we might view it differently. I don't, you can be like nice or kind or whatever. I'm more of the, like, if you know me, then I'm just going to tell you something the way it is. So for people not like that, then obviously you're more or less abrasive, and you're less vitriolic, and you're more trying to be nice and kind and stuff. They're more of on the persona side of more of like how you normally act. So in the public, you'll behave differently because you're trying to get people to accept maybe a little morsel of information and not push them away too far. So I guess there's a balance between being more of an authentic self and just saying things as they are to people who can handle that, because they're at a certain level of consciousness where they can handle that, just being told things, and it might be shocking, and then you can talk about it. Well, I think you're still wrong because of this, and then maybe the person is wrong or whatever. But in public, you got to put on a different face and a different methodology of communication or rhetoric. But from what you were saying, damn, I keep forgetting. When you were talking, like I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna interject this, and then you're like,
I'm sorry, I said a lot, and I'm like,
and I'm like, I go on that.
That's like 12 questions in one.
Yeah, it had to do with I don't know. It all ties together, but it had to do with like. I forget.
You can always go back to the slide. You can always.
I need to do the note writing. I have the paper, but I forgot to do it like Leslie suggested.
We'll figure it out, and we'll edit. So I think that apathy for the truth, and apathy in general, is one of the biggest problems that we're facing. And I was, psychologically, I was just thinking about the apathy, and there's so much flooding of information at people, and contradictory information, and conflictual, emotional kinds of triggery stuff out there. And I think that people in great part become apathetic because they shut down. There's almost like a freeze response that happens, and a dissociation that's like a disconnection, where they can't tolerate like this flooding of information. So people will either become underreactive or overreactive, and become very panicky and anxiety ridden, and maybe angry and argumentative. But both are the dysregulation, the effects of people not being in emotional regulation. So to be able to kind of really follow the path of truth and face the realities, one needs to be able to stay in emotional regulation.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we have the same terminology for that, but I'm going to assume that you mean that your emotions happen, and then you gotta process them, not immediately respond and react with whatever those emotions are causing through your body, and then feeding back to your thoughts and your psychology. You gotta take a time to breathe and to process it all, and to see how you want to choose to react, rather than letting your emotions, the negative emotions, taking you into a negative reaction.
Yes,
You can
exactly.
get into more of a conscious awareness state of how you want to respond. That's part of the responsibility process. And
Yes.
I remembered what you were saying, Derek, about the people not caring, that they're caring about this truth or that truth, or whatever field of truth they feel that they have, or I forget how you termed it, but that's the thing that people need to get over, is like, if you want to have an actual philosophical discussion with someone, well, then you can, and then you have to get on the same basis of terms. So you have to define your terms, and you have to logically progress, and then you have to hash things out as you move forward in the conversation. That can take hours and days to talk about a topic. But in general, like, the thing that everyone should be talking about, the number one focus, is on the moral truth, and that's the only one that you should have divisions and big arguments of, like, not being friends or whatever, and getting people to truly understand, because that's the only way we're going to alleviate the condition we have of the enslavement. So if you have to recognize that there is enslavement, that there is slavery, and there is immorality, and that needs to be the number one focus. And all the others, you drop it. Like, you can talk about it, but anytime you talk about it, it has to be like, okay, well, we're just friends, we're having a conversation, and I'm going to talk about, I'm a religionist, and I'm going to talk about God from this aspect, and you're an atheist. Well, you can talk about it and not get emotionally hung up on it, and try to see, well, if your foundation is this, then okay, well, what you have ultimately at your foundation is a belief, and it's not true. And then, okay, well, as long as we recognize that, then what you're talking about is a belief, and you're not talking about it as a truth, then okay. And then, anyways, you hash things out. But everything can be, like, if you're talking about serious stuff, or for people to actually unite and cooperate successfully through optimal cooperation, and that's what morality, moral understanding, is supposed to bring us towards, an optimization of our cooperation socially, so we can live in harmony. And that should be the number one goal. And everything else, talk about whatever aliens and all this other stuff which can be happening, and all that stuff can be talked about, but it's not like, you're not going to make it the number one important thing, and lose friends and fight and all this division stuff.
Exactly.
The only one that actually is a divisive is a moral understanding, and within that, the most important moral understanding would be to not accept the legitimacy of the belief in authority to rule or control others. That would be the most important one. And then you can have other moral issues of contention to gripe over. But if everyone can just get on that one page of not accepting the legitimacy of being enslaved, essentially, by authorities, by people who claim to be rulers or masters over us, then if we can just get there, we can at least get rid of government, and try to cooperate together through voluntary interactions, and try to organize our little communities and then larger communities through, like, the Dunbar number of, like, 7 to 10 people in groups, and then each one has a representative that goes in larger groups, and then it just feeds back as, like, a holarchic structure, like fractal holarchic, going up and then down through the different levels of organization of groupings of people who can communicate together, because my goal is either unanimous decision making, and the only way something can be objected to, if, like, everyone decides on it, and there's people who say no, then their no's need to be moral no's. They have to be based in moral principles, and then what the other people want is nullified. So it can be 99 million people, and if one person brings up an argument, a morally objective argument for why that's not valid as a course of action to take, then you can't take it. That's the way I view as a like more of a true society, is where everyone's involved, and maybe you'll have 90% of the people don't want to be involved in decision making. Well, okay, don't be involved then. Then it'll be 10% of the people who will decide, well, how are we going to organize ourselves in this area? The other people won't be involved. And, well, they didn't want to have a voice in it. So then, okay, then if you wanted to be involved, you could have had a voice in it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I view it, it's each person. That's the only way you retain individual freedom, is for each person to have a voice in what goes on in their area.
Yeah. It's fun to imagine these things and, what it could be like. And I'll make a comment here, and then I think we'll backtrack a little bit before the foundation. But I sometimes think about, in reality, if we're dealing with like a relatively small community, right, that's making decisions, and then you have a large number of people that'll choose, like, I don't really want to show up and be a part of that. I don't care. I'll let you guys make those decisions, right? I think what's important, though, is that the door is always open.
Oh, yeah.
To anyone to come at any point and voice their opinion and to have a say, or to not participate in something they don't believe in, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to come back to this very, very important foundational point that you're making, that the most important, the foundational issue for people to debate and to discuss is about what is moral and what is not. And understanding moral truth and how do you get there. And I think that this is still the area that people have a hard time understanding, is that there is objective morality. Could you please just talk at that basic level of, like, how do we know that morality is objective, and how do we determine that? What is right and wrong?
Well, I will direct you to the science of natural law. Wait, what did I call it? Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 1, Rights. Okay, come back in 2.5 hours. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so that's the goal of my recent work on Natural Law, the Science of Morality, is trying to explain this from a way that anyone can verify, and they can see that how it operates in reality. So you were talking about objective morality, and I have 2 images in that presentation, so I'm just gonna go look it up. It's near the end, so they're inherent. Yeah, image 25 and 26. So this one is showing how you can verify yourself how rights are inherent in existence, reality, or nature. One is you start at the individual and you work outward, and the other methodology is you go at the things that are out there and you work inward towards the individual. And from both positions, you can look at. I'll just go over the.
Are we able to get it on a screen share? Maybe?
Oh, I will. I'll send you a link just a second, because I was just going on my local file system where I have my files. But I'll send it to Derek here.
What I'll do is I'll throw it in with the video edit afterwards.
So if you go right now while I'm talking, you can pop it up and go to the bottom, and there's the one on. Yeah, so the last 2 on, like the fourth from the last and the third from the last, from the bottom of that page, you'll see the. Okay.
Hey, just so folks know, I don't know how many parts they're going to be putting out with this, natural law and morality, the science of morality. But there's like 10 hours already of that, and we're only on part 3, so hold your horses. No, I'm just kidding. It's phenomenal, monumental. Yeah, bravo.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's about around 10 hours there.
But, just joking around with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, it reminds me, when you really care, then you will take the time to learn things in great detail.
Yeah, we're Brendan Spencer. He'll tell you about that. You're going to get it from the TikTok videos.
Yeah, that's hard to learn really from.
Integrate into yourself and embody that and live that shit. Science of life, yo.
Yeah, you can get like a soundbite to interest you from like a TikTok or YouTube Shorts or whatever these things people are making in a few minutes there. So it's like you can get people to think and question things, and then, oh, that's interesting. Then they can go look into it more. But yeah, to understand it, it takes to
Right.
understand it in more and more detail. It takes more and more time to understand it to that level of detail.
So I think sometimes people, they put up their very quick reasons why not, their resistances, and then they can, from that stance, avoid the time to really understand. But it is in this deeper understanding that you get the answer to the question. And when people worry about but this or but that, we have to have a government, we need authority, right? Because what about this or what about that? The answer is in studying at these deep levels.
Yeah, because with those questions is always, oh, so you want to be a slave, you want to stay a slave. That's what it always comes back to. But whatever all the buts are is, oh, okay, so you want to remain enslaved, because that's your option. Either you want to be free or you want to be enslaved. And that's the part 2 and the part 3 of my recent presentations. What they're about, part 2 was slavery and part 3 was true freedom. So there I got into all that stuff and asking questions like, do you care about freedom? Do you want to actually be free, or do you just want to be free if it happens? Because I was defining the true freedom versus just some freedoms. Do you actually want to have all the freedom? Is it just if someone else does the work for you? Then if the condition we end up living in is of true freedom, then you'll just take it if it's handed to you? Or do you actually want to help be a part of creating that condition of true freedom? And if you don't, well, then you're fine with just accepting that it remains in the condition of slavery. And that means that you lack some self-respect and self-love, and that means you're in self-loathing. So that means in some capacity, some degree, that you hate yourself because you don't even care about yourself enough to want to engage in the possibility of ending enslavement and freeing yourself, that you're fine just being a slave of being owned. So again, that's like care for truth and going on the knowledge quest and on the journey for truth and all this stuff, and then figuring it out. And that's an alchemical part of remaking yourself, self-improvement. And then you get to like, okay, now I figured out a bunch of stuff and I understand objective moral truth enough. And then you can be a teacher to others. So it takes a lot of time of work. And that's what people don't want to do, because they're kept into the scarcity mindset. They're kept down, and kept to devalue themselves, that they don't have the capacity to even become an autodidactic and learn themselves. They could learn any skill, they could improve their life and maybe their salary. So that's part of where they're kept in their survival mindset through their the low skill set and the devaluation and the poor public education, where it just trains you to be a cog in the machine, so that you can just keep the system of enslavement going, because they'll need new jobs and you just got to keep it going and going. But you're not, because of that system where we go to work and then we have our kids, and then that's where the hamster wheel, I think the image that you saw was that little image where we live, we exist, we procreate, and then we just perpetuate that, and obviously live and have fun. That's the focus of people's life. So when they're not trying to survive and doing the things for survival in their free time, well, they just want to unwind and focus on the pleasure trap and enjoy life and live, and they're not sacrificing of their own personal time for what they want to do, to actually do things that would improve their life potentially in the long run through the great work.
Yeah.
Even in the short term.
Yeah, it really does take the ability to project ahead, and see the consequences of continued behaviors and patterns of behavior. And I think that if people can develop that ability to witness from a higher point of view, bird's eye view, and engage in the care of like future generations of the children that we are raising, that are going to be the future adults of the world, because I'm scared about that. I'm worried about the health of our children, and if things keep going the way they are, and where will children get this information?
Yeah, and related to what you were saying, to care about the future generations, as long as it's based in we always gotta to make a caveat of it has to be based in a moral foundation, a moral understanding, or else we get into the slippery slope of collectivism and utilitarianism of, oh, well, think of the, and then we get, what's her name, Greta Thunberg, how dare you, and, and until all the wokeness and all these beliefs of like, oh, well, it's the future, we're trying to save but your objective of the thing you want to create in the future is based on a false premise, because you have a false conclusion that is then a belief that's acting as a motivator and driver for your behavior. So the behavior that you're engaging in and the ends you're trying to achieve, the goals you're working towards, are not based in reality. So, it's like, oh, well, we gotta violate people's rights and freedoms. Oh, well, that's not based on a moral foundation. So as long as what we're focusing, that's part of my work, is everything we do is we're living in the present moment, but everything we do is about going towards the future. Everything we do, we're like, what am I doing today? Oh, you're thinking about the future. You're not always thinking about the present. The present is just for experiencing what's in the present, but everything about our lives is always about bringing the future into the now. Is what path are we walking, and what future are we pulling into ourselves, into the now? And that's where we have to think ahead and plan with our behaviors and our actions which path we're going to walk and what steps we're going to take. Are we going to end up over here, or over here, or over here? Well, that's all based on the prior steps. So we always have to have a vision of where we are going, and it's really important, especially in my in some of the work I've done on morality. That's what I view as the eye of providence, the fate and destiny. I'm trying to remember some of the work I've done before, but it's like 8 years old. And that there's a term in Greek called syneidesis and synderesis, and they might be reversed. One of them deals with knowledge of the past, and one of them deals with knowledge of how to act in the future. And the way I've understood these terms is you have to learn from the past behaviors and the past mistakes of your life and the past mistakes of others, so that you don't repeat those mistakes yourself. And when if you made a mistake yourself, you can choose to not repeat it, but you've already made the mistake. But you can learn from other people's mistakes and not have to actually engage in the mistake for you to learn from the mistake yourself. So we don't have to do bad to learn the good, to seek the good. We can learn from conceptual, we can learn from history, we can learn from thought experiments, and we can choose what not to do as we go forward.
Great line of points, Kris.
That's what the synderesis and syneidesis one was. You look to the past to learn from your mistakes so that you can choose how you want to align yourself and what direction you want to move going forward, what path and way you want to walk. And that's what the syneidesis and synderesis, I'm probably butchering the terms a bit there, but I view it's about moral knowledge of the past so that you can create morally in the future.
Yeah.
That's part of what we need to understand today.
Right. That key point of it's the moral foundation that creates the difference between a world that's free and a world that's enslaved. Because people, again, like we're at this crossroads where people are like, we care about the future, we care about the children, we care about the earth. And then there's this path that's following, Greta, and different things in the news that is clearly people are being tricked. And then there are people who are recognizing that there's tricks going on, sorcery going on, and they're following true moral foundations. So what is it that people will see at this crossroads, or how do people know they're at that crossroads and choose rightly, I guess?
When they are at a crossroads themselves?
Yeah, like people, we're taught. Let's say we have a whole bunch of people out there in the world who are they are well-meaning. I meet them, I talk to them, they really care, but yet they're very caught up into this narrative of like climate change and needing government to create better planning and all of this, right? And And, I'm like, wait a minute, people, like, you're missing something here. And, let's talk about that. Where do we want to direct their vision in their minds?
Well, that's probably complex for each individual, but
Right.
it comes back to, like, hey, they care and they're well-meaning. Okay, but you ask them along those lines. They care and they're well-meaning. Well, do you think you're good? Oh yeah, I'm good. Oh, so you recognize that there's like moral things and there's immoral things, and you view yourself as being more on the side of the moral things and the immoral things. And they'll be like yes or no or whatever. Depends on what their response is. But if they say yes, then you can hit them up with some more Socratic logic and like, well, can you define what morality is? And then they won't. So then you can then say, okay, well, you can't define what morality is, but you use that word as a description for yourself, but you can't even define it. So you're defining yourself by something that you can't define. So you have a lack of knowledge. You don't have certain knowledge present that you think you do. So that shows that you're in ignorance, and that's fine. We're all in ignorance. And then you can recognize that ignorance and choose from this point on, what path do you want to take? Do you want to remain willfully in ignorance, or do you want to seek out the knowledge that can alleviate that ignorance and provide you with more understanding to make better sense of possibly yourself and the world in which you live in and that you relate to?
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you define morality?
Well, that's I haven't done that presentation yet, but morality is based on a moral wrong and a moral right, and the moral wrong is initiating harm to another. So the moral right would be not initiating harm to another. And then when you get back to the wrong, since the right uses just the apathetic, the negation of the wrong, well, the wrong is not initiating harm. Well, what is a harm? Well, the initiation of harm is a violation of rights, the property rights, those 7 main rights that Passio has formulated. And that's what morality is the knowing what those the moral wrongs are, which is the initiation of harm, which is the violation of the property rights, and then everything else is morally is something that you're allowed to do, and that's how simple it breaks down to. But there's that understanding that needs to be there that people don't have of these property rights, or some people don't even believe that there's property or that there's ownership, so that they're lost there. So you can't even have rights if you don't even understand
self-ownership. That's the most important.
Yeah, well, that's the first natural right that everything else derives from. And if you can't understand that, then of course you can't understand the other rights. So if someone doesn't even understand that they own themselves, well, then I guess you could have a discussion about why they don't think they own themselves, like who else owns you. Anyways, that'd be a whole confusion for to break them out of, and then once they either accept it or reject it, well, then if they reject it, then you will never get them to understand morality properly, objective morality, because they don't even understand the thing that it's founded upon, which is self-ownership that the others derive from.
Yeah. Yeah, there is kind of a map here, right, of where these principles are defined, and then it needs to be taken down to individual situations. And that's really the beauty of it, and what makes the difference between man-made law, where they'll just make a blanket statement that no, it's illegal to do XYZ, right? As opposed to, it's only bad if it causes harm, right? So what is that difference? Why is that so key?
Well, if it causes harm, like I could, drink bleach or something and it would cause harm and kill me, but that's a right because it's my property. And the initiation of harm is when you make a false claim of ownership, which is making a claim of ownership upon someone else's property, and that's the initiation of harm. So anything that's on your property, if I have a car and I set it on fire, well, that's my problem. It has nothing to do with anybody, well, except for maybe the the pollution and the stuff. We could get into that, and that's technically, I guess, it'd be an initiation of harm. But I guess there'd be a way I could smash the windows, for example, which wouldn't pollute
Can I
anybody
give you
else.
a better example?
What?
Can I give you a better
Yeah,
example
go
real
ahead.
quick? Just, because yeah, like most of the people listening from whatever spectrum, wherever people are at, are gonna agree of just wrongdoings as opposed to right doings. But here's where it gets tricky, and why there's so much entanglements, and why it's hard for people to like break out of the matrix shitstones of this, because we're born into it. And like we're born into whatever country that kind of claims ownership over our bodies, and we pay taxes, and they have these things, and a lot of people vote into whatever. So we're all subjected to whatever degree, for the most part, of other authorities outside of our own self sovereign monarchy, if you will, of just one. You have you are the author of your life. Are you writing a good book about it, by the way? So so that's the entanglement, right? We all would like to be free and this and that, yet we're subjected to a lot of things. And so like where I was living at in France, where there's this medical system that is where has people taxed up the yin yang to pay for people's free healthcare, whatever. So there's these laws that feel like that it's like hinging off of these notions of the taxation and all that, because like for the collective, well, you have to wear your seatbelt, because if you get into an accident, you got to go to the hospital, and everyone has to pay for that through taxes, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's like the entanglement that I'm kind of getting at. So like, how can we kind of like break free of this Gordian knot?
Well, you always got to trace things back to more of a root, as opposed to one of the extended effects. Technically they're all, it's like cause creates an effect, but then the effect becomes a cause to then another effect, which becomes a cause to it anyway. So there's a big chain, but I'm just saying, go back as far as you can reasonably to like a root cause, which would be the lack of moral understanding, because you're gonna like the thing you just said, you got to wear a seatbelt for car accidents because we're in a theft system of medical care. So you're making everyone else pay. Well then why you eat junk food? Why you're not allowed to eat this, you're not allowed to eat that, because then you're going to become diabetic, you're going to get heart disease, and then everyone's got to pay for it. Well, it's the same type of argument.
It is.
But that's why it's the whole, that's two frauds of the moral frauds of the social Medicare, is that people are going to become sick because they're not. This is what I had a conversation last week briefly in the car with my partner. I was telling her this is why they make people. We're made into. Well, anyways, when they take your guns away, they make us into cowards. That's what Canada is. They're not allowed to own a gun unless it's for hunting animals, non-human animals. But anyways, so they make us irresponsible children. So we need to beg them for certain things like protection, because they won't allow us to have protection, and that's what they're doing for everywhere else. Well, we don't want responsibility, so we want to be enslaved in comfortable slavery where someone else pays the bills, because we don't want to take responsibility for us to eat properly, so that we can be in better condition and not have these avoidable like epigenetic health defects. Take care of your body, right? Input whatever you input as food, your exercise. Well, those are epigenetic factors that come outside of your genetics that can affect your well-being and your health in the future. So all this could be better managed if people wanted to take on that personal responsibility. But like Derek was saying, that we are born into a condition, into the social condition that conditions us into that condition, so that we can output into reality more in alignment with that condition to then perpetuate that condition that already was. So we keep perpetuating it.
Yeah.
But if we could break out and, all this is important moral education, that would help us become more responsible, because then we wouldn't, first of all, the fear of the truth, we wouldn't be saying, go away, reject it, deny it, ignore it. We'd want to welcome it more. and be more responsible to what we were talking about earlier with the burden and responsibility of having that knowledge and that truth in order to do something with it and try to make the world better and in turn yourself better. And so it's like it's all tied together into the complexity of the world we live in, and the complexity of each of us as individuals, as psychological beings, and trying to make sense of ourselves and others, and cohabitate and coexist and try to create optimally and in alignment with the true, the right, the good, the moral. So there's a lot of these psychological conditioning that people need to break and shatter. That's part of the shadow work to remake ourselves better than we were. So it's like I've been awake since 2006, and so it's, and I started my site 8 years later in 2014, and on and on. And it's like it's a lifelong process to learn, but once you get certain things that you understand well, you can share them with other people and get more people aware, and eventually you get on to someone like Mark Passio or other people in the One Great Work Network or elsewhere who, thanks to Mark Passio, have gained a lot of this important knowledge and are able to put it out in different ways or with more detail, or adding on to the different ways that people can discover the material and gain the knowledge in order to improve themselves and help improve others as well.
Yeah, really well said, Kris. It reminds me, you were talking about those wheels that interconnect, and it reminded me of, in the Norse tradition, the Norns, the three goddesses. They have names which I won't be able to remember. That basically was the past, the present, and the future. And so they're always weaving through time based on the cause, which is always previous to what you're experiencing now, where we're always experiencing an effect. And what we do now then will weave reality into the future. So we each have our own kind of weaving norms. And then I think as a, whole, everyone's weaving creates outcomes for all of us, the law of freedom. Yeah. So everyone's behavior matters.
Yeah. I have one of my earlier infographics on aggregately reaping what we sow. I think it's what it's called. And it has like a bunch of the spirals, just where I show like thought, emotion, action, T, and everyone's got their T, thought, emotion, action, and we're all outputting into reality, and then that feeds back as an input for other people, and then that affects us. So then what we're affected by will then affect what we output as action and behavior, which then is an effect in reality, and then other people will be affected by that effect. And then it's on and on. That's how we create the human world that we create. It's all an interconnection of cause and effect, and that's how we co-create the web of reality together. That's one of the terms I had called it in one of those infographics.
Yeah, and it can be a trivium of terror if the triad is terrorized in a terrible way by tyrants, transforming the natural laws inverted against us, which is a damn shame. Sorry.
I think that, your work and your slides are really depicting the science of natural law. You're really kind of breaking it down in such detail that I think it will help people to recognize this, that there's science to this, that this isn't just random.
Yeah, that's what the goal. I understand more.
Wait, real quick.
Go ahead.
No, please, if you wanted to respond to her real quick, I was just going to make that a segue to go back to your slides just to finish off, to kind of give a 1 minute truth thing.
Go for it.
We're at 7 of 11, but feel free to say anything to Leslie real quick, Kris. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sorry, I don't remember what you had said.
It's okay. A couple other things.
Just give me props for your incredible infographics and how it kind of depicts the science of natural law in such a really effective, superb way.
Yeah, I think we all should be really studying them. I'm studying you.
And we're not just, praising you and tooting your horn and all that.
No, but I'm impressed. And I was thinking, like, okay, you read the Bible or whatever, you reap what you sow. you're taking this concept and there's like, that's an esoteric knowledge, right? That people hear or read, but you're kind of spelling it out.
Yeah, that's exactly what my goal has been.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I really like that.
Originally, it was like, Passio's work. I think I mentioned it with James Cordner, that his work is an audio.
Yeah, I was gonna say real quick, people, if you want to check out what Kris is about, and like James Cordner did a great conversation with him. I should have mentioned that in the beginning, but yeah, he was on our show, Dissolving the Divide. James from Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth, Free Mind New England. But yeah, and I really appreciated that conversation that you had with James. So if you want to know more about Kris and his work, I'd suggest go checking that out after this. Sorry, there's so much work to check out with this man. Like, I don't know where to begin, man. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I was mentioning originally, because Passio's work was in audio, but you can't search. A search engine's not going to index it. Eventually, with the AI, I'm sure they'll go through all the audio on the internet and they'll have it indexed, and then they'll ghost it and blacklist it so no one can find it anyway, so it won't matter. But originally I was like, his information is so important, it's got to go into text mode so that more people can find it. So I first started with transcription or transcription. And then I started doing my own articles based on the first 8 podcasts or something, or first 10. And then from there, that's what I mentioned with James, that this is how I went to become where I am now. Is you start somewhere and you try to write what someone talked about, and you put it into your own words, and then after you do that a few times, you're going to start connecting things and creating your own work. And that's what happens with me. Is my goal was, I hear what someone says, like for instance Passio, and then I think about it more. I'm like, well, what about this, what about that, this? I ask questions, I doubt, I'm curious, I ask questions, and then I try to find the answers and see how it's reflected in reality, how I can make sense of it. And that's what I try to do, is I try to go into things and provide more detail so people can understand it even deeper than the original source that I heard it from, whatever this concept or idea is. I just go into it more. And that's what I've been doing, I guess, since at some point in 2014 when I started to more do my own work. And you get inspired, like I mentioned with James, I'm pretty sure it was the Streetwise Spirituality presentation with Passio, and that's where I got inspired to do my first. It was the natural law boundary conditions, that presentation, and the infographic, and then I think I did the spectrum of living, and then I did the philosopher's stone. So all those 3 were all tied together and all inspired from listening to someone else explain something just with words, and then I take it and then it gets visualized and connections, and then I try to take what I understand and I try to visualize it. I guess I'm a visual learner. I'm more both, but I like the visual component helps in understanding if you just have text on a page. But if you have, that's why I like the flowcharts. It chains ideas, or if you have visual things, it can visualize it and bring more imagery so that it's more vivid in your internal reality rather than just the words trying to evoke imagery itself. If you have the words plus someone already created the imagery to assist you with how to internally process it, well, then that can be more profound and impactful for learning the concepts or ideas.
Yeah, it's good to recognize people do learn differently, and it's nice to have different people's work to reference, and why it's important we all who understand the material teach and talk, because we never know who's going to resonate with our way of teaching, right?
Yeah, anyone can get some insight and see something and be able to explain it in a better way, in a way that might reach more people, or be more easily understood by other people who've come across the information but didn't accept it. Like for instance, if they came across Passio's and he wasn't being as nice as they would like in their emotional mind control, and they can't hear a message if it isn't spoken like a newscaster or whatever, then someone else can take the information and present it in a way that's, oh, hello, la, 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 la. Oh, I love what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah, I've been doing my thing, visualizing hip hop that aligns so much with the Hermetica and natural law and all that stuff. Before even was awakened to any frequency shift frequency shift or, delving into esoteric knowledge. I was already from high school, like, but then, like that reservoir that you have as well, that people can resonate with, even years later down the line. That's in reference. That's something there. That's tangible. You have an archive of some magical things. So we're getting towards the hour and a half mark. I want to, shift gears and just go back to your slides real quick and
Yeah.
and just
I think looking at these
I wanted
slides.
you to mention this. Just give like 1 to 5 minutes on each slide. There's only like 4 left, so.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
like
this is
bring it back towards how we can unify these divides through caring for truth, real truth, not the things that are kind of just like fed to us like pro bono, willy-nilly by people acting silly, but are getting paid more than a milli. Sorry to rhyme, but a million or whatever, a skrillion. It doesn't matter. Like you can make 2 cents or a gazillion. If they're spreading lies 24/7, like people are inundated with so much of this. So to actually care for real truth that goes against, all these programmed ideas and beliefs and information that we're pumped, and subjected to 24/7 all day, every day.
Yeah.
How do we find that true care, brother man? But sorry.
Yeah, how to find it? Well, that's a difficult one because it's for each individual. Like I mentioned, there was my catalyst, and I'm sure each one had their own catalyst that brought them towards caring more about truth and wanting to learn more about how the world actually works. But yeah, I don't think there's a one-shot solution for everybody, unfortunately. And yeah, the infographic here, well, it's the Care for Truth infographic. And it's just incorporating the trivium process of learning with Care for Truth. So this is essentially the same, I guess, with less information as the previous one that was shown, the alchemical distillation with the fire that starts it off. But it's essentially the same thing, except less information. So you start at Care for Truth. That's why it's in a heart. Everything's happening in the heart. Symbolic of the care for truth, and the care in green, and the truth as the higher frequency as what's blue, and we're in green, the care and the heart symbolism, the color for that, all that symbolism there. So the level 1 is to seek truth, so you gain knowledge, and then to develop an understanding, well, you have to doubt and question and be curious. So you be curious about what you have to be curious in order to care, to learn, to seek truth. But then even with what you consume initially, you have to be curious about that information and ask questions and doubt it as well. Well, just because you receive the information doesn't make it true. So you have to doubt it, and you have to ask questions about it. And eventually, through a filtering process and using logic and processing and potentially gathering more information, eventually you develop more of an understanding of something, and that brings you back to caring for truth. It hopefully brings you closer to truth through that process of gaining knowledge and understanding and sussing things out, or maybe higher degrees of probability or possibility if you don't arrive at an actual demonstrable, verifiable truth. So once you get to that understanding, well, that's where you can embrace and accept truth. So that's the level 2 part of the care for truth. Level 1 is seeking, and level 2, you seek truth, and then at the second level, you accept it and you embrace it, as opposed to you seek it and you find something, but then you're going to reject it, dismiss it, deny it because it's uncomfortable or whatever other reasons that we've talked about earlier. And so that's also part of the care for truth. Level 1, level 2, and then after the level 2, you get to the 4th part of the trivium, so the wisdom of right action. And this is where you have to have, I forgot the blue part. So truth is in blue because you have truth type 1, which is the condition that you have right now, the present and the past that has existed as a present at the time, and the present going forward. Well, that's the actual truth and what is. So in my presentation, Consciousness and Truth, I get more into this and these separate things, and I've talked about it in other presentations as well, such as consciousness and causality. But you have your actual truth, which can contain things that are the true way and path to live, and also things that are the false way and path to live. It's just that it's the current condition of what is. So you have to gain knowledge of that, gain knowledge of the negative, of the falsity in the world, and understand it. And then when you're going towards that wisdom of right action in the trivium to output with the goal of creating true freedom and peace to manifest, well, that's where you have to have in your internal reality, in order to take what's in the mind and act outwards from your thoughts to emotions to actions. You need to know the second type of truth, which is the path and the way. And that has to do with moral truth, the way things should be. So you have the current condition, which is how things are, what is, and then there's what should or what ought to be. And that's why when there's like this philosophy problem of the is-ought problem, which I don't really understand it that well, why there's this problem. I think they don't understand simple things, but because they don't even understand moral objectivity. So the is-ought problem is pretty understood. Once you know objective morality, then you know what should be, and you know what is that shouldn't be, and that you need to change what is into what should be. So that's where you, in the level 3 process, is you embody and become the truth. You can't become the truth itself literally, right? It's this amorphous, global, big everything that ever existed or will exist. So it's not something possible for us, but it's whatever you've learned. So with respect to morality, is you become that whatever you've learned about as a moral truth. Well, you embody that and you become it inside of you, so that in the level 4, well, then your wisdom and your right action is based on that internal makeup of who you have become. So I have a presentation on that, being and becoming, who you were, your being, and then you can become something else, and that's a continual alchemical renewal. We can continually remake ourselves. And so when we output, part of our output is so in the white part, caring for right over wrong, care for moral truth. That's the higher, truer, realer will for moral right action to guide us as a compass in life. And when we're doing that and we live it, and that's our wisdom of right action, there's also the wisdom of right action of that level 4 of sharing, speaking. Yeah, it says preach, but I've changed it to teach. I didn't have a problem with preach, but I know some people can have a problem with the term preach, but I have a new updated one that says teach. So it's share, speak, teach.
You should keep them both, but yeah, it gets wordy, but they rhyme. I love it, man. One thing I will say, awesome breakdown. Thank you so much. This is how we wield our magic. Magic can be looked at as chaos, organization, or management. Like the world is so unpredictable and all this stuff, but if we use our consciousness and have a care for all these things and recognize what's right from what's wrong and do the distillation process throughout that whole chemical transmutation of things, on a daily basis, then we can navigate this reality so much more easier and deal with the day-to-day shortcomings or mishaps or whatever much more fluidly and congruently or harmoniously.
Well, that's the importance of truth. Exactly.
Yeah.
In one of my first infographics and videos, or eventually videos I did in audio and text, is I called it the dualistic conceptual framework. And in one of the subheadings I put there, the discerning truth and falsity and recognizing the polarities of things, that it's mostly along a spectrum when you look at good or evil, moral, immoral, truth and falsity. There's so many things that exist along a spectrum or scale or degrees. And the discernment of truth of where something is on that scale, well, it puts you in touch with reality. And that's when you do that, when you align more with reality, well, you're improving your perceptions are more in alignment with reality, and that's improving your ability to navigate reality itself, because your perception is the map and the reality itself is the territory. So you want your map to accurately reflect the territory so that you can navigate and journey and go on adventures in reality with an accurate map. so that you're not like, oh, look, there's a bridge here. Whoops, I just fell off a cliff. Oh, I'm dead. That's the importance of actually having an accurate perception of reality so that you can navigate into reality without injuring yourself or injuring others, initiating harm to others.
And having a compass with that map. And that compass is that center chess piece in a lot of ways.
That's part of it, yeah. Your how you feel. Again, there's that dual aspect of, well, just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that's representative of the truth. It could just be that you're attached to falsity and you're in rejection to that truth because you're attached to falsity. So it's not an automatic thing, but the emotions are there as a signal that you need to then reflect upon and process and contemplate, and then you can go through and say, oh, well, I was feeling that way because I was still attached to falsity and I was being presented with truth, and I was having a negative reaction to it because it contradicted my ego personality construct. Or in contrary is, well, you were in the truth and someone was speaking falsity and it was like, get the fuck out of here, what are you talking about? And you can get upset for that. So something immoral can be happening and you can feel it, but just because you feel something as wrong doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually wrong. These are just emotional cues for us to then further feedback from our emotions internally in our psychology, the emotions and our thought, and keep feeding back and process. And eventually we harmonize with our emotions, and that's the unity consciousness. So we always have to do this internal work of, even when we have an emotion, just because it feels good or it feels bad doesn't actually mean that it is bad or is good. Our compass isn't just the emotional aspect, it's part of our compass, so that we can feel how we respond to things happening in reality. But then just because we have that feeling isn't your sense of feeling about something isn't going to be what determines if something is true or false. That's all.
It's part of the information that you're filtering, that you're looking at. But there's also, the left brain rational analysis as well. So there's like self-reflection is essential, and then pulling out like the morality checklist to base, what's going on a moral compass, I guess.
Yeah. And what Derek's showing here is just like, I guess the angel and the demon one, more of the similar thing, but I guess with some examples of, people view, the economic system is great, our judges and the judicial system is great, and government is great, and the police are great, and the education system is great. Look at that perfect reality. We live in sunshine and rainbows, and what is the trifecta of the American dream? Life, liberty, and happiness. Oh yeah, everything's great, right? But then the reality is, well, you open those blinders and you see the world, and we're living in pods as a matrix. We're being harvested for our energy as universal constructs in a slave system to just make us work and do things so that they don't have to do work, and they just reap the benefits of us creating everything that they can want. And that's the parasite predator system in class. And yeah, we're all bought by corporations, and we do with the corporations, and we're brainwashed by TV, and the police are just like beating us down more and more, and there's war and conflict created by governments who convince people to go kill other people over there. And so yeah, that's that one's just
excellent visuals. I love the graphics.
Thanks.
Yeah, really brings it home, I feel like. Whoa.
Oh yeah, that was the big chart. That was one of my early charts, the one I referenced at the beginning, with respect to like how when you get information and then the processing you go through. So reality is there, and then you have sensory input information, and you have an internal filtering process. So you have a preliminary comparison, which is an initial thought processing going on, and you have your preconceptions, your preferences, your beliefs, your wants, your wishes, your desires and habits. So that's that preliminary phase where you have the new information, but then all that stuff is coming up as a barrier to like do filtering. Well, that's not what I want, so I'm going to reject it. Well, that's not my desires. That's not what I want to do with my life, so I don't want to do that. The habits, the beliefs, preconceptions, preferences. So then we have conflicts and contradictions between reality and our desires, what we expect, and what reality is bringing forth to us. So between the new info and the accepted info, and these are the emotional cues that we've been talking about. You can have anxiety, guilt, shame, anger, embarrassment, stress, whatever other things, or you can have nothing. Some people you could feel absolutely nothing, and so if you have a conflict, either yes or no. So if there's yes, there is a conflict, well then you can question and doubt ourselves and the information, have curiosity about the veracity of the new info, and then we can either do yes or no. So then if we do no and we're not curious and we don't question and doubt, well then we end up in cognitive dissonance. So from that conflict where, like I'm sure you've seen some examples of like the Ash conformity test, where there's this guy, so there's only one person being tested and all the other one are fake participants, and they have like which line is longer, and they have 3 lines, and everyone picks out like the longest line. Everyone picks out the second to longest one to say it's the longest one, and the person being as part of the experiment, well, they end up going along with the conformity of everyone else. But when that's happening, they have a cognitive dissonance of, well, here's the reality, and here's what one of them would be the social pressures of people are saying it's this way, but I'm seeing the reality. So you can either choose to accept the reality or you can go against it. So one of the processes is this cognitive dissonance, where you're going to reject something and refuse it or ignore it because of the previous steps where it created a conflict and you have emotional responses. So that's where you enter into reality negotiation, and you become an arbiter of, quote, truth, right? So you're going to negotiate with reality. Reality is not going to tell you what's happening in reality. You're going to decide, you're going to negotiate with reality. So you're going to be an arbiter of truth, and you're going to choose to believe what you want to believe. And that's the, i.e., self-delusion. And as a result of that, you sustain and maintain and protect your beliefs and desires. So things don't change. You just hold on to what you're already attached to, and you reject contrary evidence. This is also the backfire effect. You can read about that. It's a thing in psychology. And the new info doesn't matter. So whatever reason, your conclusion is at the end that the new info, it doesn't matter, it's been rejected. You excuse, justify, deflect, dismiss, avoid, ignore, deny, refuse, or reject that new information. So it's boom, like a shield. It comes against your shield, and then boom, it gets bounced off because you're not having it. And that's, so you're further conditioned into what you were previously conditioned into. You didn't get deconditioned. So you have a perception of beliefs as reality, and then what you end up in is Maya, quote Maya, the delusion, the illusion of seeing the world not as it actually is. So you're not living in reality. And the rest of the flowchart goes similarly into, well, do you want to doubt and ask questions? If there is no conflict, well, then you go on to the far right side. You're not going to ask questions. So it could be you have uncritical belief. Your input is agreed and accepted, and then you have conditioning taking place. And then you're conditioned with the perception of reality as it appears, because there can be things that are presented to us that don't conflict with how we already see things, but we could already be wrong, and then we receive new information, which just is a confirmation bias, and it just adds a weight of information to make us believe that what we have is true. So it's just piling on, but the original thing isn't true itself. So that's what the far right side is, where we're uncritically just accepting it again. We're not doubting and questioning it, and it just continues to be, we accept reality as it appears because we're not digging into it more. And then the middle path is the path that we should be taking, where we're critically thinking and and involving our imagination process, thinking critically and processing information more, or we're engaging in discernment, evaluation, assessment, and judgment, and where we can categorize things, this new information, sometimes we can determine if it actually is false demonstrably, because we have something that we know and demonstrate and can verify that is true. So its opposite is automatically false, because we can't find proof of that, but we can find proof for its opposite. So you can say, well, that's false. But for things that you're going to process and you don't know, we have things that are possible, probable, or actual. And When it's possible, your decision is on hold, and your conditioning is you have a perception of a possible reality. You're not saying that it is this way, or you're not using your beliefs to base it upon. And the same thing for probable. The info is accepted. You're like, okay, well, this could be true, but you have doubt, and or oh, that this aligns a lot with this other thing or whatever, so it could be probable. And your conditioning is you have a perception of a probable reality instead of just a possible one. It has more weight applied to it, and then one where you can actually discern and evaluate that reality is that way, that that's what actually is there. Well, you agree, you input it is agreed and accepted, and you condition, like it's all part of conditioning. That's why I keep putting conditioning in there. We're conditioning ourselves of seeing the perception of reality as it is, and that's when we're grounded in reality. So that's just like a flow of some general process of how we go through stuff.
Yeah, very good. Very detailed. I find it helpful actually to hear you out loud describe it.
Yeah, well, those are all like, once you know the information, you can understand the flowchart. But if you're just looking at a flowchart,
It looks like,
what is this? Just lines
yeah, I
going.
know. Exactly. So it's worth you're taking the time like that, I think, for sure. Yeah, care for truth.
So this one it's the same as the other one. The two previous ones that Derek showed he showed the apathy for truth one, and then the care for truth with the heart, and the other one was the heart broken. So that was just me remaking these ones more updated with a darker background. So I guess the new thing would be at the bottom on the right and on the left side. So at the bottom on the right is the whole goal of this is to end self-inflicted suffering, right? So that we don't create the immorality, the wrongs, the evil, and the chaos that we're currently doing because of our support in the way of life, the false way of life, the false path that we are currently choosing to live in, which is mostly as a result of our belief in the legitimacy of authority to control others.
Oh, sorry.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you were done saying, I just wanted to insert that, yeah, I love the fact that you have the inverted trivium in the proper one on the right, as opposed to the left. So, yeah, always got to mention that good old trivium. But hey,
Yeah, I mean, it is like we haven't talked about it like that, but it's like the opposite of the trivium, where you're not gathering data, you're not processing it, and your action is not connected to.
Yeah, that's if you go to the natural law causal agent one, Derek, I don't know, you can stay on this one, but that one has where you're talking about, instead of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, it's ignorance, apathy, and laziness and cowardice.
Yeah.
And that's the one where most people are in. And the dark care one is where they gain the knowledge, but then they have dark care because they don't care about moral truth. They reject that, so they care about their selfish desires, and immoral things don't matter. And then with that dark care, they use their dark will to do, as opposed to like a white wizard or a magician. It's the sorcerer aspect of using your will, using the information, and creating into the world in accordance with your own selfish will and whatever you want, the egotism, the Satanism, as opposed to creating in harmony with moral truth, and you're someone trying to uplift humanity and yourself, and move things in a forward direction rather than in a downward direction.
And that dark care and dark will is based on selfishness, what we would call selfishness, or ego-based, self-centeredness, service to self.
Yeah, like what Passio terms as Satanism, which is egotism. It's just all about I. Yeah. And that's why the first tenet is self-preservation. It's all about themselves. I think it's even on the FAQ page on the Church of Satan, that they don't worship any deity, any god, or anything. They're atheists, and that it's more about worshiping themselves as the center of the universe. Yeah. Along with what solipsism is, right? It's all about yourself and everything revolves around you. That's what the egotism, Satanism is that's you first and everything else secondary, and then they work together to forward things that benefit each other personally, selfishly, at the expense of others for their immoral actions, the things they want to push that are immoral, so they benefit and come out on top.
Yeah, the dog eat dog.
This, yeah, sorry.
Just the dog eat dog world kind of mentality, you know, that a lot of our world is operating under.
Yeah, and at the same time, like people, you know, the virtue signalers and on all that, they're bullies just as much as the other people on that dog eat dog spectrum. Yet they give this, you know, pseudo sense of care about all these things, but they're just running on all these programs, and those are on top of other programming conditions and all these other things. And yeah, we could take it back to this whole like idea of mini-me Satanism, where it is this kind of like narcissistic kind of like, yeah, the virtue signaling. They want to, you know, get that attention for doing whatever the fuck sometimes, you know. So and it's just interesting how it's not part of much of the solution as far as like what I've been able to step back from and view objectively. Yet, yeah, it's like even some of these people are, you know, friends of mine or whatever, and I kind of gotta like shrug my shoulders or carry on, or like try to ask those, you know, Socratic type of questions to make them, you know, answer those tough, you know, contradictions within sometimes. You know, but it doesn't always work out that way. But you know, whatever. It's all about planting seeds, like in certain conferences coming up. But yeah, so everything, you know, just for the viewers out there, everything that we spoke upon, all these slides, you can check it. That was hundreds more and hundreds of hours of Kris and, you know, him breaking things down. This new series out right now. It's pretty darn
super professional looking.
loaded with it's really great, Kris. So I just wanted to, you know, put that out there for folks to check out. Yeah, we're reaching around 2 hours. So how would you like to conclude this, Leslie?
Well, like Kris, let's go take that to you. You know, how would you want to summarize the key points that you've made today, you know, in a way that is concise, consolidated? As far as a bottom line, like takeaway for people.
Call to action, solution wise.
Well, I got my site slogan. It's truth is love, love is truth, truth unites, lies divide, embrace truth, care for truth.
Yeah, come down.
So it's all about caring for truth, and then that takes you the rest of the way. It all starts there. You got to start. That's what Passio's earlier podcasts were about, right? It was whether it was Buddha or not, but it's attributed to Buddha. There's only two mistakes you can make on the path to truth: not starting and not going all the way. So you got to start, you know, and then once you start, you can take breaks or whatever, but it's pretty much going to be a lifelong thing. That there's always going to be more things that you can learn, even if you learn a lot about moral law and moral truth. There could be more that you can learn, and there's other things that you can learn. So you can always learn more, and eventually, that care for truth can get you to care more about yourself and self-improvement, and then you know, figuring out that if you want to be truly free, like true freedom, then we have to remove the things that are currently legitimized, accepted, tolerated, standardized, and become the norm of our reality that are enslaving us, all these negative things. Well, we have to care to get rid of them, or else we're still going to be enslaved as individuals. And yeah, it all starts with that care for truth, and eventually, you know, hopefully you come across the right information that keeps feeding nurturing that inner core of your being, that spark, that care for truth. You got to keep feeding it the firewood, right? So you got to keep feeding it You got to keep feeding it truth so that it
Being
keeps burning.
inspired.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then it can die down, and then you got to reinvigorate it to keep charging and persisting and going forward on whatever the quest you're on, whatever you're learning, and go for more. And it's always changing.
The hero's journey, and it's the continuing. I like that idea of you keep feeding the fire, your own flame, to stay this alive in this quest for truth. And I think that your breakdowns are really a great source for people to go to when they're confused, when they're a little lost, and need to, kind of figure out where they're at in this process, because we could figure that out looking. There is a science to natural law, and I think you do a great job of putting that out in visual form. Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate
And
it.
articulating the concepts super well. Yeah, really appreciate your intellect and your ability to organize these really complex concepts.
Thanks. Yeah. That's what I focus on, is the more the left brain like stuff that's going on in reality, and understanding also internally how our thought processes work, and then to eventually output into our behavior.
Yeah.
All that stuff is like crucial to understand on how to change ourselves and change the world. So I focus on the morality and the consciousness, human consciousness aspects is what most of my work has been on, understanding things like truth and all that stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing. I know it's a lot of material, and you did a great job of encapsulating some key points here today for us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
And quite an honor. I think you're our first international guest. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Maria West, because she was born in the Philippines, like English ain't even her first language. But yeah, like,
well, we're the retarded brother up north or something. So,
oh man,
we're not that foreign, but we're up north.
Yeah, not at all. Like, we all share similar divides, but as far as like anything out of the Americentric scope, I know we're all North America, but like USA, it's been like that all day with so many truth seekers and what they got to say.
Tell us a little about the Canadian perspective and like what's
like
happening
just in a
there.
nutshell, anything that's different as far as like any other divisions that you see between like Canadians within your country and how they're pitted against each other. Any other differences of what's in America type of thing?
There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of similarities. Like,
would you give any advice to your folks out there listening?
I don't know. Learn objective morality. That's what everyone needs to do.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a good place to end. Learn objective morality.
Natural law,
Yeah. All right. I guess that's called a wrap. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't mean to tease you with, like we could delve into some of the other subjects. Solution oriented, of course. That's what it's about. But like, Kris, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wealth of knowledge. Once again, from that evolveconscious.org, such a monumental website they formulated, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's a great resource for the teachers of natural law. So I'm going to start checking it out even more.
Great.
Totally.
Thank you for the kind words. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All righty. Well, we'll catch you again in network somewhere.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Yeah. Likewise, Kris. Take care.
Okay.
And everyone else out there. Thank you.
The philosopher's stone is inside the soul. Internal alchemy, power to turn, let it go. You already know the holy science. I say peace, open the door, hello world. Tired of all the violence, yeah, I know, girl. Shots cut through the silence like we pro-war. Dying over diamonds, what we got to show for? What we got to show for? I say peace, open open the door. Hello world, can a song change the planet or maybe help us grow more? Fresh out the womb and the view is unpredictable. Together we collective, we limited individuals. Indivisible, united, that would be better. The progress is possible, don't ever say never. We can build a better place, design a better fate. It won't be perfect, but I promise there's a better way. Just let me meditate, focus on my breathing. Spent too much time weeded in the darkness with my demons. We all have, I just think it's time that we release them. Take the powers from the powers that be and just relieve them. Clean energy's the power we need, achieving freedom.